Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate our listeners on matters related to finance, legal, insurance, accounting, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you will find our content useful as well as entertaining. The Expert Network Team consists of Carl Frank of A&I Financial, Mike Miller of Miller & Associates CPAs, Jeff Cromendike of Security First Insurance Agency, and I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney at Goodspeed & Merrill.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, for real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis. We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful. If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team members in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
We encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our team members. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Now on to today's podcast.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Carl Frank, and I'm here with a full house. Our guest is Cameron Morgan. Hi, Cameron.
Hi, Carl.
Thank you so much for being here. Cameron's a financial advisor at A&I Financial Services. We've known each other since we went back to school.
Yep.
We met at University of Denver when we were a few of the grown-ups getting our master's degrees.
Yes, and I was making mistakes with college funding even then, but I've learned a lot. It's been, it's not quite 20 years. It's been quite a lot of years, though.
I don't want to admit how old we are. In the room, we've got men who are much older than Cameron and I. We've got...
That's me for sure.
Wisdom beyond my years is what I say.
Is that what it is? Well, to my left is Nate Merrill from Goodspeed & Merrill. Thanks for being here, Nate.
Thank you.
Jeff Cromendike with Security First Insurance. Thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carl, for
I
having me.
am really looking forward to your questions today. And the real expert in the room about how to pay for all this stuff, at least with the tax side of things, Mike Miller with Miller & Associates CPA.
Hey, thanks, Carl. I don't know about the true expert, but...
about taxes.
I have my ways.
We'll be leaning on you for sure. This podcast is going to be fun. We're going to talk about all of us are putting kids through college already. And it's a completely different story from the five of us. We've all done it in a very, very different way. I think mine is the least interesting, which is I wrote a check. At least you chose a state school here in Colorado, University of Colorado, my alma mater, a great school. And so it wasn't crazy as expensive. It wasn't the most expensive school that she chose. But holy cow, I mean, it's still a big number. And I'm looking for great advice to share with everybody here and learn with everybody here about ways we can save paying for college. So, Cameron, any first thoughts before we just start asking you for your expertise?
Yeah, one thing I would say, referring back to the mistake I made when I was getting my master's degree at DU, I think 529 plans are widely thought to be just for babies. And they have some great benefits right now in Colorado for babies. You get $100 from the Department of Education if you have a baby and open a 529 plan. You also get $25 from College Invest. So that's a nice way to get started just with a young child. But
yeah, free money.
Free money. Always cross the street for free money. But current students can use a 529 as well. You need to put the money into the account and let it sit for about 2 weeks or 3, and then you can take it out and pay for current college. So why was I not doing that when you and I were in college? I don't know.
Right.
My poor husband, he had to pay the mortgage, he had to pay my tuition, he had to pay our son's daycare, and he was doing that all just on his one income. So if I knew then what I know now, I would have at least relieved our family of a state income tax bill.
I think most people don't know what you just said, which is absolutely fantastic, that you, in Colorado, for Colorado residents, you get a state income tax deduction when you contribute money to the Colorado 529 plan, and you only have to leave it in there for a little bit. So if you've got anybody going to college anywhere, it doesn't matter if they're going to school in Colorado, you can get that state income tax deduction on your tuition.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about the mechanics, too, if we can. So because you were just talking about a strategy there that I think people would appreciate knowing a little bit better of, but how does a 529 work? if I've got money in a 529, does my 529 cut the check to the actual educational institution, or do I cut the check and they reimburse me? How does that exactly work?
You have a lot of options. The parent is always the owner, which I think is very important. I would not want my child in charge of the money in his 529 plan any more than he already kind of is in charge. He's sort of in charge of spending it, but I don't want him owning it. So you can ask Scholar's Choice in Colorado or College Invest to send a check directly to the school. That's one of the easiest ways. Let's say your kid lives off campus. You can send a check to the landlord. If your kid is buying groceries, you can give them kind of a monthly amount toward what's regular and customary, so basically the room and board cost, and also books. So let's say your student goes to the bookstore, buys their books for the semester, and you pay that credit card bill, then you can reimburse yourself. Or if your student's paying the credit card bill, you can reimburse your student. So the money can go to the institution, can go to the parent, can go to the student, can go to a third party.
It's just going to be record keeping is important if you
Yes.
if you take it out directly to yourself. Okay.
Well, and on that note, we're basically figuring out these expenses right now. I've got a son up at Montana State, and he's living off campus now, so we're paying rent to some third-party property manager or something like that. And so I think that brings up the audit question. I guess I'd like Mike to maybe weigh in on this.
The
Mike,
word.
The A word, yes. So Mike with Miller and Associates, he's our trusted accountant, and for both our business and also our personal. And so we lean on you a lot, Mike, for these kind of things. And so that's one of the questions I have. I mean, what would an audit look like on a 529?
Well, I've never been through a legitimate audit on a 529 plan, but basically, when you withdraw funds, there's a form that you get. It's called a 1099-Q, and it outlines the funds that you withdrew, the fair market value, and the basis of the funds that you had in there. And so anything that gets withdrawn, you get that 1099-Q. It gets reported to the IRS as well as a copy given to you, which is then expected to be reported on the tax return. So if you've paid college education costs on Montana State, your son's going to get a Form 1098-T, which outlines the tuition and everything that you paid. You may have books and some other extra expenses, but if that 1098-T is in excess of the amount that you had withdrawn out, well, you obviously spent more money than you pulled out of the plan. If you took more money out of the plan that you actually incurred for your college expenses, that actually gets reported on your return, and on the federal side, the excess that you took out actually gets imposed a 6% excise tax. And then the excess that you pulled out that you originally got the Colorado deduction for, technically you should add back to income and pay taxes on. I've never seen them really audit anything like that. I've never been, in the 15 years I've been doing this kind of stuff, I've never seen.
Probably not a real
audit.
Abusive area. For the
Yeah,
most part.
it's
And the tax cost to them is peanuts.
is minimal. Yeah, 6% of an excess distribution out of a 529. They're just not going to waste the agent's resources on looking at that. If it shows up and they're made aware of it, great. But other than that, they're not really looking for that. I didn't say that. I'm just telling you the way it really is.
Yeah, Cameron, this is kind of a smorgasbord episode. We had you on talking specifically about how people can plan and save for college. One of the things we didn't talk about last time was other available resources, scholarships, grants, loans. Maybe you can delve a little bit more into what you're aware of or the processes behind maximizing all those other financing options.
Absolutely. The numbers that we have are showing that about 4 out of every 10 kids are actually getting merit aid, and about 5 out of every 10 kids are getting some kind of grant. The tricky part, when people hear that number, they're like, well, that's a pretty good chance. Almost half of my chance that my kid will get a grant or a scholarship. But the amounts are in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. So the amounts of free money that people are actually getting is not enough to cover all their tuition, much less their room and board. And it's not even everyone. So it's better to plan that you won't get a lot of merit aid or a lot of need-based aid rather than, and be pleasantly surprised if you do, than the other way around.
You kind of referred to that as the Bed Bath & Beyond approach to college, is like, take your coupon, take the money that they give you, but don't expect it to continue. Or, I mean, some of these
Right.
things you have to maintain ridiculous GPAs that maybe none of us in the room would have been able to do, so why expect our children to do it? That sort of stuff. But
Cameron had a ridiculous GPA. I remember that.
Only in grad school, I have to say. The sticker price is definitely not something that should deter you, even
Yeah.
though it is a scary number. And the price of college has gone up 28% since 2010, which is a very large increase. And yes, the sticker price of college is not what most people pay. The average discount now in America is about 56%. But that requires some strategic applications. So if you are a student with a high GPA and high test scores, and you apply to a highly selective college, that's it. You've used all your merit up just on getting in. Whereas if you apply to a school where your GPA and or your test scores are in the top 10% of their existing freshmen, or at least in the top quartile of your existing freshmen, then you can expect that college is really going to want you. And they're going to show that they want you by giving you money. So it's about being strategic with your merit. Either you're going to use it to get in, or you're going to use it to get money. And that's something that sometimes kids are maybe not quite so keen to apply to maybe a school that's not ranked as highly on the U.S. News and World Report, or that doesn't have a gorgeous sweatshirt or a nice fancy bumper sticker for your car. But if you are not able to stroke that $300,000 check for all 4 years of college, then it's smart to be smart with your merit.
Yeah. Always be cautious when your child says, this is the best party school in the country, right?
Do you think?
Or the world.
Yeah. So another topic we didn't discuss last time, I'm curious how this dovetails with some of the planning you do, is vocational. What if I have a child that wants to be a car mechanic or an esthetician or something like that, and they don't need to go to 4-year? Same rules apply in terms of, is financial aid available for those types of things as well, or?
You can use a 529 for certain. I haven't seen as much in terms of grant and merit aid in that category, but man, smart choice, I think.
Boy, I'd agree with that. You want to focus on your ROI when you look at these types of investments. I've got a really interesting question, at least from my point of view. We mentioned briefly the Roth IRA and helping your kids that way. Can you talk a little bit more about how you could use it for college and some of the downsides to that?
I think one concern that we as planners have of people relying on their Roth IRA to pay for college is it's kind of easy to start overspending on college and to rob retirement to pay for college. So if that's your strategy and you've been able to do a lot of Roth conversions, or you've been able to contribute to a Roth, and you are earmarking that specifically for college, then go ahead. But if it's part of retirement and you're just looking at either, for some folks it's home equity, they're like, oh, I'll refinance my house, and with today's low mortgage rates, I'm gonna use my house to pay for college. I'm not gonna make my kid borrow money for college. Well, it's sort of squeezing a water balloon. You still may be overspending for college. So being really clear and having a plan for how you're going to pay for all 4 years of college before you apply is really important. And then having that discipline to kind of stick to the numbers that work for your family. So I'm a huge fan of Roth IRAs, especially for young kids. My son has one. We matched his earnings, so he got to keep his earnings from lifeguarding, and we put the money in his Roth. And when I explained that to me, he said, do I still get to keep my money? I said, yeah. And he said, that is an excellent deal. And I said, it is an excellent deal. So our family was able to do that for him, so to get him started on the road to retirement. And putting money in a Roth IRA, doesn't affect our expected family contributions. So
maybe
college.
not the best idea for mom and dad to use their Roth IRA, but for the kid to have a Roth IRA.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well, and given that this is the more fluid conversation, I'll just throw in there, that's one of the things I'm expecting to set up with my kids who are just now entering college phase is I was fortunate enough to have a fund set up by my grandfather to help defray some of the costs, because without that, I don't know how I would have gotten through college, quite honestly. And so I see huge value in helping my kids get through college, get through that stage of life without debt and being able to start their lives without that huge encumbrance. But I do want them to view it as a legacy component. So I've suggested to them that we'll pay for your college and you pay it forward. So instead of paying us back for getting you through college, you start right out of the gates saving for your children's college education, and eventually this will magnify, so it creates a family legacy of access to college.
I love that idea.
Yeah, that mirrors my situation. I was 4 years old, I think, when my grandfather set money aside for me and my cousins, some of whom weren't even born yet. And that really, it wasn't everything, but it showed a lot of intention as well. There's some interesting studies about even putting $50 into an elementary kid's 529 plan increases their likelihood of going to college by some really statistically unlikely amount. There's a lot there around legacy, but there's also a lot there around intent and what that message, the message that your kids get.
Yeah, well, I've often told this story. My grandfather had Parkinson's at about the point I was an emerging adult, and so our conversations were somewhat limited because the whole conversation was labored for him, and he was old but every conversation, every time I went over to visit with him, it was, how are your grades? You know, I mean, he was so focused on education that it really was like that we were talking about earlier. I never doubted, because he had set up the ability to do so, and then just the reinforcement that we received year after year after year from him that you're going to do this, you know.
Right, and part of it too is making smart choices with those gifts that you're given. I think it's still possible, even with a lot of family support, it's still possible to overspend on college.
Oh, absolutely.
And so making sure that those conversations include, you know, not only what's possible, but also what maybe is a limit. Great opportunity.
So I'm kind of the older guy in the group. My kids are already out of college. And back in the day when my kids were going, scholarships were pretty abundant. What are we looking at as scholarship? Twofold question. What are we looking at for like full ride scholarship potentials now across the country, which were pretty abundant when my kids came out and when I went to school? And also, if you do save with a 529 plan and you fully fund, say, $100,000 into a 529, and they get a full ride scholarship, what are your options with the 529 plan at that point?
So I'll answer the second part first because it's easier, which is you can take out money penalty-free if you get a scholarship. So that helps a lot of parents who, you know, are maybe saving for the worst but hoping for the best.
Wait, say that again. How does that work?
Essentially, it becomes a qualified expense. So let's say you get your kid gets a $3,000 scholarship. That then entitles you to take out $3,000 a year penalty-free from the 529 plan.
Holy cow.
There
Did
you go,
not know
tax
that.
tip for the day.
Well, that's how you get your money out, Jeff. You just got to convince your kid to get a scholarship. It's the loophole, though.
But you got to have him apply for scholarships. He may get a couple.
Does ski school count?
So on the other side of it, I mean, full rides are diminishing for some students and increasing for other students. So universities used to want a well-rounded student, right? You had some charitable work that you did, you had your grades, you did your sports, and you had maybe some other activity, whether it was like church or community, something like that. 4-H. You were trying to put together a well-rounded resume for yourself. You were trying to look like a well-rounded student with your activities and your academics and your
It
athletics.
was all fake, right?
Maybe.
Given recent
bit.
news events, you know.
Right. No felicities in the room.
Yeah.
And now colleges are looking for a well-rounded class. So they want the eccentric kid who's focused on one thing solely, and they pair that kid with another kid who's focused on some other thing. And so the well-rounded student isn't such a focus anymore as the well-rounded class. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about full rides or aid or merit aid, is kind of, do you have a passion and can you express it? Are you involved with a charity that helps fund, breast cancer research, or did you start a charity that, is providing cancer screenings to, underemployed people in your community?
So what you're telling me is there may still be a place for libertarians in modern academia.
Sure.
As long as I'm an extreme libertarian,
Sure.
or my son, or
Be an
whatever.
extreme something.
Dream a little dream.
Yeah.
Be passionate and have a strength, and just keep playing that. Keep playing to that. If it's libertarianism, you go, Nate.
I'm all over it. And believe you me, I've indoctrinated every one of my children. So
That's great. Mike, you were telling us a little story a little bit ago. Maybe you want to share. You creatively funded your kids' college. How'd you do that?
Well, again, I'm the older guy in the group. I invested in real estate when I just understood it. It's tangible. It's there. I can see it. I can manage it. I can touch it. I can feel it. Stocks are under control of somebody else, and they're just handled differently. So I just created a nice portfolio of real estate properties. And so when my kids went to school, it was a cash flow deal. And then when we needed to kind of close out the ending balance, if the cash flow wasn't enough, we basically just sold a property. And
it
covered,
worked.
And it worked, yeah. I mean, covered all the costs. Now, to your point earlier, I mean, the costs of college back then were significantly less than they are now. So, and even when I went to school up at Colorado State, it was significantly less. And my dad paid for that. And so I felt an obligation to put my kids through school. So I wanted to do that, to your term, Nate, as a legacy. And now I've told my kids, if they have kids, my kids haven't decided yet if they're having kids, that they need to do the same thing.
yeah. And you learned some mean plumbing skills in the process, I'm sure.
Oh, I learned so many things. It's not even funny. Not even
I won't
funny.
laugh then.
But even that, to that regard today, Nate, it's a completely separate topic that we could do a podcast on, is how you could take that piece of real estate and do things with it to create opportunities to fund college.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are quite interested. I haven't seen it work as well in Colorado, simply because we have a pretty hot real estate market here, and we also have very expensive land grant universities. Our public universities are about 40 to 50% higher cost than other states. So going to a state school in other states is more affordable than it is in Colorado.
Is there like a in-state tuition sharing arrangement that some
There's
states
something
have?
called College in Colorado, the Colorado Opportunity Fund, and it's about $45 per credit hour if you're an in-state kid going to an in-state school. And it's about $25 a credit hour even if you go to a private school like DU or School of Mines.
But aren't there some states that kind of share
Yes.
in-state tuition benefits?
Yep, there's a program called WUI, which is the Western Universities Exchange, and I know Montana State is part of it. You do have to apply. One of my friends learned the hard way. You have to apply for that as a freshman. You cannot apply later. But you get about the midpoint between out-of-state and in-state tuition if you're part of, I believe it's nine states.
Yep.
There's a lot of universities that participate in it. So that's a great way to go out of state and not pay out-of-state tuition.
Yeah, an application is the key. Depending on which college that is, our son was late to the game on that. And Montana State is a very popular school for Colorado kids, and so WUI was not an opportunity for him. University of Montana, wide open. He could have gone there and done the WUI without a problem. But you do have to apply. That's for sure. I'm interested, Cameron. You had mentioned that you just recently sent your son out of country as a part of your college planning and college financing. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I did. I'm married to an alien, which is the whole key. So it's an unusual strategy for some people, although I do know a couple people who also are married to non-U.S. citizens. My husband is Australian. We've been to Australia, a handful of times with the kids and visited family and such. And we were there in the summer of 2019 and did some college visits. We happened to be there in July, which is when they do their prospective student weekends. So we went and toured 3 different universities. And, not only did my kids sort of, learn a lot about what it might be like to go to school over there, just in terms of the geography of it and the climate and the environment. But we also learned as parents that in Australia, the undergrad program is 3 years instead of 4 to 6 in Colorado. And that the pricing for citizens is a lot less. So room and board is pretty much the same, unless you're going to school in New York City or, in a really small town, you're going to pay about the same for room and board. So We helped our son understand that that wasn't a deciding factor and that the tuition was a really big deciding factor and the number of years in school was a really big deciding factor. It turns out the university he picked has a great business program and that's what he wants to study. So for our family, it was an unusual workaround, but it's worked out really neatly. And we can use our 529 money to pay tuition for the University of Western Australia.
Just curious how marketable, does marketability of that kind of degree in the U.S., is it pretty commonplace, or are they now looking at possibly relocating to Australia and continuing their careers down there? Is there a concern there?
Absolutely, both on both counts. Will his degree be as useful as a degree from CSU if he's looking for a job in Denver? Probably not, because there isn't going to be a big network of alumni that he can tap into here. Might he stay in Perth? My mama bear heart says, oh no. But it would be, my mother-in-law's revenge because her son went off to London and married an American. So both are possibilities, but I'm excited for him. He's having such a good time. He's
American
right
or Yankee? I thought it was...
No, Yankees British.
No, I think... Don't they refer to him as Yankees?
She was born in
under?
Edinburgh, so yes,
Yeah.
I am a Yank.
That's fun.
Well, I guess, I can ask maybe one more question here on the back end, but, again, for those that have maybe overfunded their college planning, specifically through a 529, I really like the Roth IRA. I wish my financial advisor, Carl Frank, had turned me onto a Roth IRA, but no, instead I put a lot of funds into the 529, and first of all, Reed did get some scholarships and went to a state school, and it just hasn't been as expensive as we thought it would be. And then our youngest, just really not sure what his college plan is going to look like. It could be more like a trade school or maybe just the school of life. We'll just have to see. But feeling like at this point in time we're maybe a little overfunded and wondering how we're going to get that money out or how we're going to use it in the future. So any thoughts around that?
Well, what about graduate school? You don't think that's in the making?
Yeah, well, I'd be good. I'd be okay with that.
In the family?
Yeah.
Anyway, what are some of your
Absolutely.
thoughts?
There are a bunch of different options. Graduate school is definitely something I'm anticipating that if there's money left over in my kids' 529 plans, and there may well be, certainly for my daughter, she's looking, she's 12, but she's looking like someone who will be going to graduate school. If I don't get there first, right, that's also a possibility. The other possibility or option would be transferring it to another member of the family. So it could be a first cousin of your kids, so your nieces and nephews. I have had a plan in my hip pocket for a while that if my kids got full ride scholarships, I'd make my brother buy my 529 plans and transfer them into his daughter's names. But
informally, of course.
Informally, I'm the older sister, but his kids' 529s are also well funded. So looking at the rest of your family tree is another option if it's really an amount that you need to move, and you don't want to pay the penalties. So as long as it's used for higher ed, the limitations are not very strict.
And the other thing we discussed just briefly before this was the future family tree, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's nothing that requires you to take that out after any period of time. You can let it ride for 20, 30 years as your next generation matures, correct?
And there's also, and this might not be your preference, but there might be someone out there whose preference it is, you can actually turn a 529 plan into a scholarship. Oh, okay. It becomes owned by the university of your choice, and they administer it. So that's kind of a cool option for people who are philanthropically inclined or feel like they didn't pay the school enough while they were there and they want to give them more money.
But no new tax deduction for that, I assume,
correct.
or is there?
Correct.
No.
I don't think
All right,
so.
no more deduction than that. So to clarify, if you're going to transfer the 529, has to be to a family member?
You would still own it and just change the beneficiary, but you can transfer it to a new owner, which might be, your sibling or your in-law,
Okay.
Who has a child that's going to college.
And also to clarify, we're here in Colorado, so if you invest in a 529 in Colorado, you get the Colorado deduction. If you invest in a 529 plan in another state, you don't get the deduction in Colorado.
Correct. And that's really important because Colorado's got a very generous plan. There's not a cap on how much you can put in up to, well, I think 428,000 around about there. You can put in quite a lot. Other states, for instance, I know in Minnesota, you have to be earning less than 75,000 to be able to contribute to a 529 plan. So we have a really great plan that doesn't have income limits on it, and I think it's worth using, maybe not quite to the extent that Jeff used it.
And we were joking earlier, but there's some truth to this. You could spend it on yourself. So, the Golf Academy idea, I think, is something that,
I think it's genius. Or driving school, like go back and be a rally race driver. There's got to be a
Go to culinary
technical
school?
university for that. I'm all over that. Or go into ranching. I don't know.
Ranching?
Nate should go into seminary, I think.
I'd do it.
Or a history professor.
If it meant keeping the money from the government, I'd sign up for that in a heartbeat.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Cameron, for your brilliant advice. Gentlemen, thank you for sharing your time tonight. It's great to see everybody again. We look forward to our next podcast. And Cameron, we'd love to have you back at any time.
Thanks, I'll be here.
Create a beautiful day. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the information we shared.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with someone else. And join us next time.
If you want to meet with a member of the team, please contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
If you have special topics you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know at the same email address. Again, that's info@expertnetworkteam.com. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the firms represented, nor does it constitute legal, investment, or accounting advice, and the views are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisory services may be provided through A&I Financial Services, and securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.